I'm Robin Lundberg, joined now by Brady Quinn, who will be part of the Big Noon kickoff crew on site in Indianapolis, Indiana for the Big Ten Championship on Fox. Pre-game coverage 6:30, 8 o'clock. The game, Michigan and Iowa, Brady. And, obviously anytime you get to this time of year, it's exciting. But I have seen some lines that have Iowa listed at 0.5 points in the first half and 0.5 points in the second half. Do they have any chance against Michigan?
Yeah, of course they've got a chance. They're one of the better coached teams, and it's not like they stumbled their way into 10 wins. They really could be an 11-win team if you go back and come kind of through the season. But they have to play a very specific style, and that's one that's going to include no mistakes, dominating the line of scrimmage on offense and defense, and then making a few big plays on offense as well as maybe in the special teams, which has been one of their main keys, and hoping probably on top of that Michigan comes out and doesn't have their best day.
Now, the Wolverines, obviously, if they win, that would, complete a really good undefeated season for them. But there is the other things surrounding that program. How much do you expect the talk to heat up around the college football playoff selection when it comes to Michigan, given everything that's hanging over the program?
Well, look, they win and they're in. I don't know that the NCAA is going to do anything at this point. It sounds like the Big Ten's done with their punishment up to this point, which probably makes for a really interesting post-game ceremony if Tony Petitti is going to be up there giving out the Big Ten championship trophy to Jim Harbaugh. We'll see if that actually plays out. That being said, I don't think the NCAA is going to intervene at this point or junction of the season. I think they'll probably wait until the spring and summer of next year before something happens. So it will be Jim Harbaugh coaching Michigan, I think, for the rest of the way. And look, if they win this game, they're in.
Regardless of what happens, like let's say Alabama wins against Georgia. How do you see things shaking out if that's the case?
That becomes the most interesting question. And you start looking at, all right, well, who wins the Pac-12? Is it undefeated Washington, or is it a 12-1 at that point Oregon, who is able to overcome the loss to Washington early in the season? Then you start maybe comparing resumes between two 12-1 teams. I also think you could have Texas in the mix as a 12-1 Big 12 conference champion. And then there's Ohio State sitting there 11-1. Now, I think the overriding factor will be the conference championship, that 13th game indicator they talk about. Head-to-head play would play a factor too. Whereas if you're the committee and you're looking at the fact that Texas beat Alabama in Alabama early in the season, you'd have to think Texas is a part of it. But how could you leave out Bama being a 12-1 SEC champ? So things get really, really interesting. I mean, I think the Big Ten's the only conference that you could say if Michigan wins is undefeated, they're 100% safe. Next to probably you'd say the SEC champ. I just can't imagine they're going to leave out a one-loss Bama as the SEC champ. And so really then it comes down to who do they feel like the best four teams are, or the best two in this case. And that's where it gets tricky because you're starting to look at strength of schedule, you're starting to look at the resume, head-to-head, all those things that factor in. And so you'd have to think again that Texas would somehow be a part of it. And then do you take the Pac-12 or do you leave out an ACC undefeated team? I think it would depend on who ends up winning. I'm not sure you could put in a one-loss Oregon over top of a 13-0 Florida State team, despite the fact that Jordan Travis isn't there. It'd probably be a bad precedent to set. But it's last year we've got a 14 playoff. So next year we're not going to have these sort of issues.
Though there are new issues arising or new storylines arising in college football with the transfers and everything going on. I saw Riley Leonard, maybe Notre Dame could be pursuing him at quarterback. Obviously, you're an Irish guy. What do you make of a story like that?
Well, look, obviously Notre Dame went to get Sam Hartman last year in the transfer portal. He did a great job kind of embodying everything I think they were looking for at that spot. Riley Leonard seems to exhibit a lot of the same traits and qualities given his time at Duke. Had a phenomenal season in 2022. And if you look at this past year, obviously he had the injury. That was unfortunate. Not quite as good of a year. But it will be interesting. I mean, you'd think that there maybe be a chance that he'd go to Texas A&M with his head coach. If that's not the case, I'm sure there's probably some other suitors in there as well. He's got to be considered one of the top quarterbacks in the transfer portal.
What did you make of Matt Rule's comments? He said basically, it costs at least $1 million to get one of these quarterbacks.
I think the interesting part is they took a transfer quarterback last year. So is he saying that from experience? Is that how they got their transfer quarterback? So it kind of struck me as like, well, wait a second. Are you speaking like here? Or are you speaking like last year? Like, how's this going to work? So, look, we're at a point in college football where clearly there needs some sort of intervention. I think everyone can agree on that. In regards to the fluidity of players, getting on and off of rosters. I mean, I saw a stat the other day of the top 50 players in the 2020 class. there's 7 players that either didn't change positions or didn't transfer. 7. Now, 3 of that group were guys who are already in the NFL. You know, guys like a CJ Stroud, for example, Anthony Richardson, for example. And so when you take that into account, it's pretty crazy to think how many players are really using the transfer portal to find an opportunity to play, but also the big pink elephant in the room, an opportunity to cash in potentially in NIL.
One team that used the transfer portal a lot coming into this year was Colorado. They've had some deep commits. What do you make of that?
It's hard to know at this juncture, you know, how you read into it. I think clearly the way the season finished, no one's probably got a good taste in their mouth right now. And you've got an offensive coordinator who was demoted, now is the head coach at San Diego State. I'm not sure how you end up viewing that when you've got a guy you demoted and he immediately gets a head coaching job. It might be saying something. And on top of that, you got Tim Brewster, a guy who's well known in the college football circles, and he stepped down as well. So I think there could be some concern as far as what that staff's going to look like, what this roster and team's going to look like. And based on how they finish the season, I'm sure it's going to be tough sometimes to be able to sell a lot of kids on this team, being able to be a Big 12 contender moving forward, despite the fact that Shedeur is extremely talented. They obviously have a lot of talent at the skill positions. And Deion Sanders is going to have to make some changes to figure out how he can maximize what he's got on his roster, because you're not going to always be able to turn over a roster in 1 year's time. You're just not. You could probably do it once, supplement, you know, the few years after that, but you really have to build your roster through the high school recruiting. And that's probably where their focus is going to shift now.
How about Caleb Williams? I saw him say, it's a game time decision about whether he enters the NFL draft. Do you think there's any chance we see him back at USC next year?
I don't know. It'd be tough to think that he would pass up on the opportunity to go play for an NFL franchise. I mean, for starters, now with the basically 4 years with the 5th-year guarantee, it's a lot of money to pass up on. And I know these young men can make money in NIL. However, it's not to that magnitude. And I think, look, the earlier he gets into the NFL, the sooner he gets to that second contract where you really make a lot of money. So it would be surprising to think that he would potentially pass up on it. I think there's a lot of factors that weigh into it. And there's only been a few guys who've kind of been able to dictate maybe what happens when they're at this point in the draft. But I do think he's the best quarterback in this year's draft class. If he does declare and decide to come out, he's just a unique talent.
Brady Quinn will be part of the Big Noon Kickoff pregame coverage, 6:30 p.m. Iowa-Michigan kickoff, 8 o'clock on Fox. Anything else, Brady, you want fans to know about the rest of this college football season and what you'll be a part of?
Well, look, it should be a fantastic ending. I mean, look, for all those out there who are going to be concerned about whatever happens this weekend, it's okay. We're a year away from not having to worry about this. Kind of a new scenario, too. We're going to get the first round on home fields there on those campuses. So just try to take it in if you can, the drama and everything else that comes along with college football, and get ready for, I guess, the start of a new chapter in the way everything's evolving and adapting right now.
Brady, appreciate the time. Have fun this weekend.
Thanks for having me, Robin.